Across the battlefields of the Eastern Fringe, the elite warriors of the Tau Empire fly at blinding speeds on maneuverable jets. Their advanced targeting computers tracking enemies and allowing them to eliminate threats with bullets, plasma, fusion blasts, missiles, and drones. These are the Battlesuit pilots, each one piloting angular, colorful war gear that represents the peak of the Tau Empire's technology. From small and stealthy units protected by digital image projectors to giant striding weapons platforms powered with barely contained fusion reactors, the Battlesuit embodies the very anime-inspired style of the Tau, and they look amazing while doing it. There's enough variation in this army's lineup to satisfy every type of mecha enthusiast and inspire newcomers to maybe start looking into some gunpla. So be prepared to dive deep into the technical lore of every single battlesuit of the Tau Empire. So let's start with what defines a battlesuit in the context of the Tau, because if we're honest, some of the earlier marks of this list are almost indistinguishable from power armor, like the type worn by the forces of the Imperium or the Kindred of Votan. For the Tau, battlesuits are not just something to be worn. Yes, the smaller marks certainly are more like armor, but the real difference is that battlesuits aren't something a soldier wears. They are piloted. The fire warrior inside each suit is a skillful technician trained in every system, balancing power distribution, checking artificial intelligence, and managing half a dozen weapon and support systems, all while engaging the enemies of the Tau Empire in fluid battlefield scenarios. They mostly achieve this through a sophisticated neural link which makes the user's thoughts react through the suit as though it were a second skin, again similar to the Imperial method of hooking into their vehicles, although the Tau method is reportedly less invasive. The first battlesuit types were fossil fuel powered, then fission reactors were used until the radiation poisoning got too much to deal with. On and on and on, new designs and iterations were tested, used, and discarded until the Tau were finally able to use them in combat against a technologically advanced foe like the Imperium. By then, the battlesuits had become basically what we know them as today: fusion-powered, highly advanced mobile weapons platforms piloted by some of the most loyal and dedicated warriors in the galaxy. The average battlesuit is bristling with weapon systems, but also supports gear like multi-spectrum sensors, drone controllers, targeting systems, beacons, marker lights, black sun filters to see in the dark, and of course, jetpacks and various upgrades to those systems. Battlesuit designations are, as you would expect from the Tau, simple and organized. There will always be a two-letter identifier first. What these mean we're not quite sure, as it's only a rough translation from the Tau language. However, we do know that XV is the most common and applies to the bulk of standard battlesuits, but as soon as the suit gets to Knight and Titan sizes, we see KV or KX used. The next part is a numerical classification made up of two parts. The first is a mass rating, from 0 being basically just powered armor, all the way up to 13 for the Knight-sized Taunar Supremecy armor, the biggest suit we've seen. The last number refers to the suit's function from 1 to 9. So for instance, the XV-22 worn by Commander Shadowsun is a standard battlesuit with a mass rating of 2, and is in the field testing phase. Easy, right? Then let's dive in. The smallest suit on our list, the pilot suit, is the perfect place to start, as there is quite a lot we can learn about the Tau and their love of battlesuit technology just from this simple piece of war gear. And to get that part out of the way, it is very simple. We actually don't know a whole lot about this suit because the XV-02 pilot battlesuit is, as the number 2 in its designation would suggest, still a prototype, which is currently being field tested by the famous Firecast tank ace Commander Longstrike. Mass Class 0 is the smallest designation in the Tau arsenal, and we can certainly see that with how closely the suit hugs the wearer's form. So then what would make this a battlesuit as opposed to just a type of body armor like the sort worn by fire warriors? Knowing the requirements for something to be a battlesuit, we can assume that the pilot variant has the servos typical of other suits, maybe to help with weapon loading and repair work, but not any armor, as this suit is designed for tankers who are already piloting tanks. However, the pilot suit is almost definitely fitted with enhanced support systems that give the wearer more information about the battlefield, targeting computers, terrain scans, deployment positions, enemy locations, and perhaps even a linkage to the vehicle itself in a similar manner to Imperial tank pilots. What's not speculation is that the pilot suit illustrates how important battlesuits are to the Tau way of war. If they develop one that's only purpose is to make a tanker better, instead of just adding these systems to the tank itself, then that speaks volumes about the Firecast's love of these suits. The first known stealth design is the XV-15 Stealth Battlesuit. This early example of Tau stealth tech looks almost exactly like a suit of Fire Warrior ballistic armor, but with a couple of exceptions. First off, there's the obvious stealth field generator. The Tau stealth technology uses projectors attached to the leading edges of the armor to break up the suit's shape, making it very hard to spot while the field is active. It also has some extra armor plating to offer more protection for those operators who frequently find themselves isolated from their support. And of course, as with any other battlesuit, the XV-15 has assistive servos to enhance strength and stamina, as well as full integration of Tau battlefield support systems. These were the stealth suits that the Tau were using when they first came into conflict with the Imperium, and they very clearly didn't measure up because they were quickly replaced by the XV-25. Just looking at the two side by side is enough to see the obvious change in the level of armor and capabilities. The XV-25 is so much bulkier than its predecessor, and the larger frame allows it to have more hefty combat systems, as well as providing extra defenses. The XV-25 has all the capabilities of the previous suit, plus enhanced musculature, allowing it to equip the standard burst cannon or a bulkier fusion gun to deal with enemy armor, as well as having enough space and stability to make use of one additional battlesuit support system. And finally, there's the massive XV-95 Ghost Keel. Standing over 3 times the height of a Space Marine, the dreadnought-sized suit incorporates a powerful stealth field generator installed into a pair of drones that follow the pilot around and provide cover without taking up any additional power in the suit. This lets the Ghost Keel equip a staggering array of heavy weaponry, which turns ambushes into a nightmare for enemies as the large suit bursts from hiding, unloads a wild amount of firepower, and then fades back into seemingly thin air. Those of you familiar with Tau wargear might remember that there was a suit type in between the XV-15 and 25 variants, the XV-22, which is currently being tested by Commander Shadowsun. This variant was intended to be what replaced the original XV-15, but it was still in testing during the Kappa Mortis incident, which spurred the sudden change from the underpowered XV-15. At that point, Commander Shadowsun had already discovered that the XV-22 was much better suited to commanders and was likely too expensive to press into mass production, but don't worry, the XV-22 not only continues service for Shadowsun, but also supplied design notes for the Ghost Keel and XV-46 battlesuits that we'll be talking about next. The XV-46 Vanguard Void battlesuit is a relatively rare example on this list. Despite being out of its prototype phase, it is used in very specific theaters of combat and so has only been seen a handful of times. As its name and number tag would suggest, the Vanguard suit is rated for operation in space and was intended to help crisis teams clear derelict starships and other void-bound ruins. As such, we don't even have good pictures of this wargear, with the exception of one well-known variant. The XV-46-4 is a commander variant of the Vanguard suit and was famously worn by Commander Chassot Cais during the Cronus campaign. The typical Vanguard suit is equipped with weapons that can make use of the tight confines often found in space hulks, which means flamers and burst cannons, as well as a fusion torch to cut through bulkheads. Its standout features are the Pheotalk nanocrystalline armor, which provides lightweight but superior protection, and the pair of BX-11 exploratory drones used to map out the tangled interior of Rex. Whereas the Vanguard is one of the rarest types of battlesuits in the Tau Armory, the XV-8 Crisis battlesuit is one of the most common and most varied, as you might be able to guess just from the fact that there's no additional number tag for the unmodified XV-8. The baseline Crisis suit is the quintessential mobile weapons platform. Its tough armor provides protection on par with Space Marine battleplate, while being light enough for the use of a jetpack for quick repositioning. The onboard fusion power cells also allow for up to 3 hardpoints for weapons and support systems. And of course, these include almost all systems and weapons except the heaviest and rarest wargear in the whole armory. Flamers, fusion and plasma guns, smart missiles, drone control nodes, even special iridium armor plating for commanders and bodyguards who require even more protection. And then there's the mountain of variants built off this frame, a truly staggering amount of them. From the XV-84 Commander variant with marker light systems, and the XV-8-05 Enforcer, and the XV-86 Cold Star suits that incorporate updated systems for this new millennium of warfare. One of the most unique Crisis Suit versions, however, is the iconic XV-88 Broadside Battlesuit, a heavier adaptation of the standard design which trades the jetpack module for the ability to equip its signature heavy rail rifles, which makes most armor look like paper. The Broadside is a heavy fire support platform and so usually equips high-yield missile pods, seeker missiles, or even plasma rifles for more pinpoint defense. It's really hard to overstate how important the Crisis Suit is to the Tau organization. One could make the argument that they are the backbone of any effective Tau force, even when you consider how much they tend to lean on their basic Fire Warrior squads. It's hard to justify new battlesuits after the versatility and success of the Crisis Suits, and so inevitably, the war gear in the rest of this list will become more and more specialized, and perhaps none of them show that better than the XV9 Hazard Close Support Armor. This suit encapsulates a whole series of close assault platforms with weapon loadouts designed to shred every sort of opposition possible in a frenzy of high-powered fusillades. Twin-linked burst cannons, fusion cascades, and phased ion guns are all unique and terrifying variants of other battlesuit weapons that are only possible to sustain thanks to a new and compact fusion core that runs the XV9 suits. The Hazard and its variants also come equipped with not only a Crisis-style jetpack, but extra vectored retro thrusters, allowing the suit to achieve limited flight as well as extremely high mobility. That plus the photon grenade launchers make the Hazard suit a superior ambush and counterattack platform. Some of you might have noticed that the XV-95 Ghostkeel stealth battlesuit is of the same mass category as the Hazard, and actually they share a lot of the same components right down to the base frame, which is why the Ghostkeel is such a robust ambusher. Regardless of its utility, however, the Hazard suit is not deployed very often, as traditionalists in the Ethereal and Earthcasts believe that the XV9 goes against typical military doctrine, and the resources would be better spent on adapting the more tried and tested Crisis suits to fulfilling the same role. And while it's true that the XV8 has the ability to be kitted out to perform swift counterattacks and devastating ambushes, even the newer Cold Star models just can't put the same amount of firepower as the Hazard can. So for now, Hazard teams continue to be the best choice to counter close assaults by heavy infantry and vehicles. By the time of the Third Sphere expansion, the Tau had become very familiar with the forces of the Imperium and had constantly been forced back whenever the humans deployed their gigantic tank and walking war engines. Even super heavy tanks were enough of a problem that a new battlesuit design purpose was needed, and the Earthcast delivered. The XV-104 was the very first of its kind, twice the size of a Crisis suit, with a frame so tough that it can support half a dozen weapon and support systems, as well as armor tough enough to allow the pilot to brawl with Imperial Knights and super heavy tanks, all while maintaining the speed and maneuverability expected of the XV series of battlesuits. The Riptide required a whole new batch of weapons, all heavier versions of what could be fitted to earlier models. Heavy burst cannons, ion accelerators, and arrays of lighter weapons like fusion blasters, plasma rifles, and smart missile systems. It was also fitted with specialized shield systems to supplement its defenses, but with all this power load and the increased mass, Tau engineers were suddenly faced with a new problem. The fusion reactor wasn't enough. Or at least it wasn't enough to keep the Riptide nimble and fast. The Tau didn't want to fight the lumbering tech of the Imperium with their own slow walkers, but with just the standard fusion reactors, something as massive as this just couldn't hope to do more than plod slowly across the battlefield. To compensate, the Earthcast developed a dark matter energy core, the Nova Reactor. Early versions proved too unstable, but with further testing, the new reactor was configured to be able to give the Riptide short bursts of extreme energy boosts whenever the pilot needs some extra firepower or mobility. This new power source more than made up for the shortfalls in the Riptide's performance and allowed the XV-10 series to run literal circles around the enemies of the Tau Empire. Of course, the rarity of the materials and the complexity of the components required to build these suits mean they are only given out to veteran Crisis suit pilots and bodyguards. The Riptide platform ended up being so successful that it got cleared for an offshoot, the Arvarna. This Mass 10 suit was created by infamous Earthcast battlesuit designer Shoan, using resources allocated for other purposes. The Ethereal Council had ordered some new research into Mass 10 infiltration and stealth suits, continuing the trend from previous marks of battlesuit designs. The problem is that Shoan had a habit of thinking that he knows better than his ethereal masters, and an even more annoying habit of being right about that. So he told the Ethereal Council that his new project would indeed be a new infiltration variant of the XV-104, but instead he stripped the suit of its thrusters, added extra armor, and installed an enormous pair of pulse submunition cannons to create the XV-107 Arvarna just in time for a massive Tyranid invasion. Now, despite the 7 designation denoting infiltration platforms, Shoan's 3 new prototype suits used their new guns, heavier armor, and their powerful Nova reactors to hold back an entire swarm from a pivotal city center, revealing Shoan's deception and his brilliance all in one stroke. Frustrated, the Ethereal Council was forced to acknowledge the rogue Earthcast engineer's good work, and begrudgingly accepted that such a large suit was likely better suited to outright warfare rather than infiltrations. They granted permission to continue leaning away from stealth models of the Mass 10 suits with the XV-109 Ivara, a shock assault suit with increased mobility and extremely close-range weaponry like the Plasma Flamer and the EMP Discharge Cannon, meant to incapacitate enemy war machines rather than outright destroy them. Shoan's instincts and experience on the far frontier of the Tau Empire proved to be better than any plans from the distant Ethereals, as these sturdy frontline fighting machines have held the line against aggressive enemies ever since. Okay, so I know we just got done saying that the Tau were very adamant that they did not want to fight the plotting Titan Walkers of the Imperium with a plotting walker of their own, but, well, the Imperials started taking the Tau more seriously, and so they were forced to develop some battlesuits that could handle dueling the biggest war machines the Imperium sent at them. And that meant creating weapons big enough to turn a usually nimble battlesuit into an artillery emplacement. That's the idea behind the KV-128 Stormsurge. The first of the ballistic suits, the KV designation makes it clear that this platform is very different from its predecessors. Standing about the same height as an Imperial Knight, the Stormsurge is an enormous weapons platform, a walking artillery piece, and one that is so large that it needs to be piloted by 2 soldiers. Thanks to the type of weapons it uses, Tau commanders believed that the Stormsurge would be better served having at least one of its pilots be taken from veteran Hammerhead crews, specifically those that have graduated from the ballistic suit academies of Borkon. The other is typically an experienced suit pilot, although it's seen as a less prestigious posting since the Stormsurge is much less mobile than other suits and so tends to stay in the back line. However, the weaponry more than makes up for the lack of any frontline thrill-seeking. Throughout its development, the Stormsurge was used to test weapons so large that they had previously only ever been installed on spacecraft. Suddenly, having the sort of firepower on the battlefield was a revolutionary change. Currently, all known sightings of the Stormsurge in action have reported that the primary weapon is either a pulse driver cannon or a pulse arc cannon, both of which are massive plasma cannons that make use of particle accelerators to deliver pinpoint or explosive shots to any armored target inside a massive attack radius. And while those weapons are able to bring down Titans, they're hardly the only weapon systems on board the KV-128. Double cluster rocket pods, 4 destroyer missiles, 2 air-bursting fragmentation projectors, 2 smart missile systems, 2 burst cannons, and twin-linked flamers in case any infantry get too close. The Stormsurge is equipped to take out any enemy armor or infantry cluster purely on its own, and it's backed up by crisis teams, hammerhead squadrons, and broadsides. Well, there's not really anything we can think of that could withstand that sort of firebase. That plus the ability to redeploy relatively quickly even over rough terrain makes the Stormsurge a uniquely capable artillery piece. The last suit on our list is, as you might expect, truly one of a kind. Because the Stormsurge proved that the Tau could use a suit without extra mobility, without spontaneously exploding, our favorite Earthcast trickster Shoan felt it was time to make an assault pattern that could walk into an Imperial Titan's barrage and survive. The KX-139 Taunar Supremacy armor is the biggest battlesuit ever conceived, sacrificing mobility for protection and overwhelming firepower, while still maintaining enough dexterity to stride across a battlefield faster than many Titans could even dream of. One of the biggest issues with fighting the Colossal Walkers and Bio-Titans of the other races, even with the Riptide and Stormsurge, is that at those sizes, the Tau were typically forced to rely on heavy flying units like the Manta in order to gain ground, as opposed to just holding it. And the Manta has been suffering in fights with the giant Tyranid monsters especially. So the Taunar is big to make use of several different types of super heavy weaponry, typically the Pulse Ordnance Multi-Driver, which is a triple-barreled particle accelerator, but it can also make use of the Nexus missile system and the heavy rail cannon. Thankfully, Shoan thought to include arms on this suit, and so the Taunar also uses triple ion cannons or fusion eradicators on each fist, and goes on to include a pair of vigilance defense systems mounted in the chest. These systems connect multiple weapon types together, similarly to the Hurricane bolters seen on Astartes vehicles. These can be burst cannons or missile pods. Finally, the whole thing is protected by a powerful barrier shield generator, which can reportedly withstand Titan-class weaponry. At this size, it would be absurd to have a battlesuit move as quickly as the Ethereals would undoubtedly have wanted, but seeing a Taunar on the battlefield is something no Imperial commander or hive mind enjoys, as it usually heralds a headlong push led by one of the most devastating weapon systems in the galaxy. The Tau are so ingenious, we wouldn't be surprised if there were 3 more suit designs deployed by the time we get this video out. But which one was your favorite, or better yet, which one got you to start collecting Tau? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, as the Ethereal Council has decreed, for the greater good, each of you requires more lore.